Hello, it's Blockchain here coming at you with another technical analysis update. For those of you just tuning in, I'm primarily an Elliott Wave trader using other areas of Confluence and other technical analysis to really complement my price analysis. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the charts. Guys, before we dive into the charts, again, just want to take a second and let you guys know that my website is live. There's going to be a lot of awesome things coming, lots of exciting things happening, but the biggest thing I just want to announce real quick is right here on the website, where I am actually giving away my #1 trading strategy for free. So make sure you guys jump over to the website, click on this little get in touch icon, and it'll take you to another page. Just submit some information to me. It lets me know where to send it, and that way you can actually get a free video walkthrough of my #1 trading strategy that is consistent, profitable, and reliable, and applicable to any market. So make sure you guys jump over there. I've heard a lot of good feedback from those that have started to put it in play. Also available for questions and answers. So if you guys have questions on it, feel free to message me, email me, leave a note on the video link, and I will definitely get back to you. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the charts here. We're going to start off with ETH, and again, I'd start off on the higher time frame, really dive into the smaller time frame, and kind of go from there. But you guys, I've got a lot of great information, and you guys will not want to miss this video. I think there's a lot of big things that are up and coming for the crypto market and overall, probably the stock market, the same token. So let's really kind of just dive in, and really, I'm looking at this entire thing as this whole move down, just overall pretty corrective, and from this bounce up again pretty corrective as well. So one thing I do want to point out real quick is just there's been a lot of talk about it, and that is the hash ribbons. So we did get it confirmed by the other day. It was kind of on the fence. If you guys were watching, I think it was on Sunday. It was teetering back and forth where it would flash and disappear, the flash and disappear. Well, when the market closed, we did get a confirmed buy, and this is definitely something I want to talk about, just because there's been a lot of talk around the crypto market, and what does this mean? How accurate is it? So on and so forth. What's interesting though is that we did get the buy signal. However, you can see with the red lines, we're under a lot of sell pressure immediately afterwards. Now, from history, if we go back and not get them on the daily here, if you go back and you look, so right here we did get a buy signal, which is a pretty good buy, but we did have a little bit of a drop afterwards on ETH. And actually, let's look at this one, get a little bit more history on it. Same thing, we did get a buy, and it was pretty much right up here on the top. We got the buy on the top, and then we pretty much immediately after we dropped. We didn't break the prior low, but I mean, that's still almost right back to where we started. It's kind of same thing. We'll go back, let's look for another one. Let me flip the scale here. Again, just a quick look, where we did get a buy, and this one was in 2016, which, I mean, this was years and years of a bull run. So it's pretty interesting because it has it called really before a strong market, then from a bull run, yes it has. But has it always called the exact bottom to buy? No, it has not. And that's just something I do want everyone to be aware of and take note. We did get this buy signal, but we had a little bit of a pump afterwards, and then ultimately dropped, and it did not call the prior low of that. We did come back down and set in a new low before we ultimately took off. Now that's just something to be aware of, because again, everyone's been talking about it, saying, hey, we got to buy, and I think that could potentially fake a lot of people out, just because in my eyes, this has been very, very corrective, this whole move. I can go into a few details on some of the smaller time frames, but some things just to look at is I can't count a 5-wave structure. I don't see this as any kind of leading diagonal. It's kind of going into a rising wedge formation, but it's not meeting the criteria in my eyes that this is going to be an impulsive wave to potentially continuous upwards. Can it? It definitely can. And then I do want to also note just on volume overall in general, it's just been declining this entire move up. Um, let me add that real quick for you guys so we can take a look at it here. So on the volume note, this entire move, it kind of similar to what we had here. We had, um, pretty decent, descending volume as we continue to drop. But kind of right here, just volume has been steadily decreasing as this entire move has gone up, which it isn't always the most promising sign. We're not really breaking the upward trend with a lot of support, in my opinion. And then this is my Gann chart on the daily. It's also interesting to see, we've found resistance on this trend line, multiple times over the course of this entire move up. We haven't been able to break it, and we also are at a point where we just intersect with two. I think if we were going to break it, generally it's the weak points is where they tend to cross together. We're past that point, and that means we now have two trend lines we need to break to move up. But it's pretty interesting seeing how the daily Gann chart has played out in regards to this drop here. From a time analysis, these are time fractals where we normally see reactions in price, and it's a little bit different on ETH just because of the overall top was a little bit later than what the overall top was on Bitcoin. So when we're looking for confluence, from these time fractals, it's going to be a little bit different from what we see on ETH and Bitcoin. So when we get to Bitcoin, I'll show you what I'm talking about. But these time fractals have really called some pretty decent price action points on the daily. Next one is coming up on June. Interesting to see what that looks like. Obviously it is a little bit of ways away. Again, being it on the daily, but you can see every single time we dropped where we had reactions on these trend lines. Pumped up, had a reaction, found this one as a support as we started to move down, but resistance, resistance, resistance. So in my eyes, it is getting a little top heavy. We are consolidating. We're getting to a little bit more of a point of apex. Especially with the volume is decreasing as much as it has. I am expecting a pretty large move coming up, and I'm looking for it probably this week, mainly because of the Bitcoin Gann chart, which I'll just flash real quick, just because again, guys, we look for confluence. And the next response from a time fractal is April 30th on the Gann chart for Bitcoin. Where we are on the daily for Bitcoin on a Gann chart, we're kind of in the middle of nowhere for the most part. But once we dive into Bitcoin and see the smaller time frames, it'll start to make a little bit more sense. But the big thing I wanted to point out is the time fractals, where these have typically seen pretty decent reactions as we go through some of the months in the past. And, we're pretty much to that point where we need to make a decision when it comes to ETH and Bitcoin, just because we've gotten up pretty high. We're at a point where we're going to be breaking some major resistance levels potentially, or we're going to get rejected by these support and resistance levels as well. So, even if going back on ETH on this daily, you can see where we're at right now. We found support here for a little bit and then broke it, fell straight through. Right here is resistance, resistance. Kind of same thing, was resistance here, resistance where we broke it, and then we just drop right back through. So right where we're at, about that $200 mark, this a pretty proven point of support and resistance on ETH. So let's go ahead and dive into the 4 hour. And this is what I'm talking about in regards to it just being all corrective. We definitely have some 5-wave moves, but it looks like it's really all ABCs in my opinion. Even this last move here, it's been kind of difficult to turn into an overall 5-wave move for ETH, just because that's a pretty strong 3-wave move right there. And then this I can see as a 5-wave move. So an ABC, kind of similar, where we have this move down. It was an ABC and then another ABC here, making this potentially WXY within. And that's what I'm talking about in regards to it's just not a very clean 5-wave move. It's pretty choppy, pretty corrective. Not a lot of strong impulsiveness in my opinion when it comes to it. So again, we're kind of where we are, and I'll look for areas of confluence. So where we are, strong resistance. We're also at the 0.618 of the overall move up, move down, and then this bounce up for this fib level here. And we're also tagged the 786 of the WXYXZ fib levels as well. So it's interesting that those all match right here at the same level. Those are all corrected fib pulls. So it's going to be interesting to see, what we do so far. It looks like we're getting a little bit of a rejection right here. So over these next couple of days, I think it'll be pretty telling in regards to overall what does the market want to do. I think even this pump, that it's been a pretty decent recovery from this drop. However, it still is kind of screaming indecision in my eyes, and I don't think that we're going to be off to the races for a bull market quite yet. But really, what we decide here, I think, is going to be a overall trend that we're going to have for probably a little bit of time over a couple months. So that's what I'll be looking for. Right here on the 4 hour. If we do have a rejection, some possible points that I do want to point out. Double bottom ish. We do have the 618 and the 786. Remember, like I said, ETH was the 786. That would put us down at $42 roughly for ETH, as well as kind of bounce off this longer term trend line that we have going back for quite a while. Same thing, we also have this trend line up on the top as well, and it's interesting that the 618, we can go ahead and, depending on the time, how it plays out, place it right there as well. So, and that is interesting to just, again, kind of look at, because I am looking at this overall as a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as a 5-wave move down, but we can also potentially look at this as an ABC, as a zigzag, and really kind of go off that play as well. And depending on what it does play out to, that's going to be interesting to see where we do have some potential fibs to pull. So that's what I'll be looking for, and it all comes down to really what we are going to decide. Right here, in my opinion, that's really going to be this week. All right, let's go into the smaller time frame, roughly the 15 minutes. So, again, kind of where we are right now. It's been indecisiveness, lots of ABCs after ABCs. You know, if with this right here, it's just going to be an ABC potential zigzag. We could be coming down, which we almost already did hit, but found support right here on this trend line, as well as these EMAs for the 55 and the 21. It looks like, but potentially coming down to this trend line here, which is also matches up right with the 618. So it doesn't look like we have completely dropped impulsively 100%. We'll get confirmation if we do come down and tag the 2.236 and make a move that is going to be 5 waves. So it would be a 1, 2, 3, 4, and a 5. Now, if we do have that, that is going to be kicking off impulsively, and that is going to lead to further downside, in my opinion, because it is going to be a 5-wave move. So if it starts with 5, it will need to end with 5. And either what that is, it's either going to be an A, B, C zigzag, or it's going to be a wave 1 back up for a 2, and then further down for a 3, 4, and a 5. Okay, so that is going to be what I'm looking for here in the little bit more of a short term. See how this plays out. We, depending on how the overall wave structure does play out, ETH does like to have overextended fifth waves, whether it's a fifth wave inside the third or an overall extended fifth wave. But it'll be interesting to see, how we play out here. If this is going to be kind of our bounce point where we do kind of come up, retest a little bit, again, do a little bit more sideways motion and then back down. Or if being a C, we're going to get a decent bounce to come up with another ABC or a 5-wave. And if we do come up with a 5-wave, again, if it starts with 5, it needs to end with 5. But again, that's what I'm kind of talking about, where there's a lot of things that have indicating that this is the top, but we have broken some pretty major resistances before along the way, where we do have a little bit of a drop, and then we just come back really strong. Right here is a great example of it, where we had a 3-wave move down, and then we came back and we just pumped through and broke a lot of resistances pretty strong. Even right here, this was our local top around 190 for a while, where we had a couple failed breaks, where we consolidated sideways for a little bit, hit a strong trend line, and then just bounced right up and broke it with conviction. And that's what we like to see on some of the breaks. But what ultimately could play out, what this is somewhat leading me to also, is if this does come back down for an ABC, can this come up and create like another ABC, creating a potential head and shoulders? That's kind of what I'd like to see on some reversal patterns is, again, what could this play out to be to create that, and it could potentially form it. But again, time will tell, but this is what I'm looking for ultimately here in the short term. Long term, I guess midterm, I'm pretty bearish, just based upon all the TA that I just covered. We did have that buy signal on the hash ribbons, but we are under a lot of sell pressure, as you could have seen before. Right here with the red lines, a lot of sell pressure right here, and that's pretty interesting, because normally that happens before we get the buy signals on the hash ribbons, but right now we're getting it afterwards, and so what I'm looking for here in the short term, we'll see what it plays out to be. But strong resistance where we're at. If we do break it, we need to see a conviction. We could potentially set up with a swing fail in regards to where if we do come down, kick up with a 5-wave move, and then just ultimately get a quick wick down, where we just have a pretty massive red candle to send us off to the downside. So we'll kind of just see what this plays out, but really over this next week, that's what I'm looking for. But looking for a pretty big move, and just because the way that it has been playing out, volume's been going a little bit lower, moves have been a little bit slower, and also a little bit less as well. So again, guys, we'll see what it plays out. So I'll keep you updated with some daily updates. Let me know what you guys think. As always, if you like my content, like my TA, throw it up in the channel, throw some support, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, subscribe, like I said, and I will talk to you guys later. All right, guys, let's go ahead and dive into some Bitcoin. Again, just as a reminder, the reason why I do Bitcoin and ETH together, just because there is a 98% correlation on how they move. Now, the wave structures aren't going to be identical, which is kind of why I do look at them, because wave structures and their price action could be more indicating towards how they are going to next react. But overall price action, they do move pretty simultaneously with overall how they move in the market. So when we do look at Bitcoin, I'm still looking at this again as a corrective move down, potentially as a just WXY. We're looking to come back down and complete our Y wave. And what I was kind of talking about before, where this potentially could be an impulsive wave down. Looking more potentially as a zigzag, honestly, on how high this has come up. It's pretty high for a wave 4. Wave 4 would have liked to seen it come up, really no more than where we were for the W wave at roughly around 6,900. Get rejected at that 7,000 resistance level that we did break, and then back down for the 5th. So based on how high we did come up, it looks to be a little bit more of a B wave, of a potential zigzag for an ABC, which means that we will have what we'd be looking for, if that's the case, is another 5-wave move down for a C. And potential targets for that is going to be around 4,100 to 35, even down here to a 1-to-1 at 27.92. And it kind of depends where ultimately this W is, because it can be counted two ways, where the W finishes here, or I can also be looking at to where the W finishes right here based on overall wave structure. And that's where we'll kind of decide ultimately how far we can come down, because normally for the Y wave, you won't want to see it go past the 1.618, as that's going to be a little extended, which depending can put us right here in that region, the 2,900-ish area, but it all is going to depend on where we do come down to in regards to how was this one potentially, was it finished here for a W, or is it finished here for a W? But ultimately, you can see it's come back down, retest our local bottom around the 618 or the 786 for what we had before. Then also want to just bring up again, I talked about it with ETH, but also the hash ribbons, where we did get a confirmed buy. It was kind of bouncing back and forth the other day, whether we did get that buy signal or not. But that doesn't always necessarily mean it calls the top. It actually honestly does a pretty terrible job at calling the obviously, I'm sorry, calling the bottom of the price action to actually go ahead and buy. But what it does normally signify is that it generally means that what we've done before in the past is we are going to be starting a pretty strong upward cycle. And so you can kind of see, right here, we did get a buy signal, but again, we did have a pretty decent drop on it, and then we did move up. Um, Even kind of same thing before in the past, right here we did get our buy, pretty much right here at this top, and then we had a pretty significant move to the downside, but then we started our rally after that. And that's kind of one thing I am looking for. But what's interesting on this is we normally don't get the sell pressure. We haven't gotten the sell pressure signal right after the buy before. Normally it's been right before, and then we get the buy signal. So be interesting to see what truly does that mean. Does that mean that this is going to be the top? Because there is a couple indicators that I am looking at to where this could be maxed out right now for Bitcoin, and then coming back down to retest some of the most recent lows that we've had. And all depends, really what we're going to be looking at here within the next few days. Like I said, I'm looking for a pretty strong move to either the downside or the upside coming up. I am leaning more towards the downside, mainly just because of the indicators that I am looking at. So even on the Gann chart that I have, right here from our overall local high, we are sitting at the 382 fib level. There's going to be pretty strong resistance. Even same here, you can look back where this was strong resistance right before we broke to the upside. So it'll be interesting to see, what we play out here, and as it was, support, right here from the Gantt chart at the same time. So it's gonna be interesting to see. But we also have a time fractal coming, which normally signifies a reversal in price. And you can see from these time fractals that we have seen a pretty strong reaction. And that's what we're going to be looking for. So if we have been trending up this entire time, being that the time fractals have been fairly strong, it'd be interesting to see what this potentially will be signifying if it does play out. And that is as of April 30th for what I'm looking for. And it can be a couple days before, it could be a couple days after. It doesn't mean it's going to happen exactly on April 30th, but I am potentially looking at something pretty strong coming up this week. You can see on the daily, it is kind of in no man's land at the moment, except for this fib level right here. Next area of resistance for Bitcoin is going to be right up here at 9,300. So, if we do break and we break strong, like we have done before in the past, be looking around 9,300. First resistance level, first support level to the downside is going to be back here again around 6,000, 6,100. And we could potentially just follow this trend line as we go down with the next support level around 4,500-ish or so. And that's kind of what really I'm looking for so far on the daily. And again, I start off on the higher time frame, dive back down to the lower time frame. Kind of interesting to see. We do have a fib level right here around 4150. See how that matches up. Depending on where we could come down to a couple $100 off from the fib level that we have. But we could take a look at some of the smaller time frames as well and see how they play out in regards to some support. So we'll be looking to see what this reaction does, but I'm looking for a pretty strong reaction as we come up, as volume has been declining over this overall move. We have been kind of getting a little weak, in my opinion, where we've just been kind of rolling over for the most part, starting the trail sideways. Not a lot of strong reactions on either side. So this next week, I think, will be pretty telling in regards to what direction are we ultimately going to go. So if we dive into the 4 hour, what I was looking before from the last video is us to come back up for a fifth wave test around 78.50. Well, we did really get pretty close. 78.30 looks like is where our high was for that potential move. Now we still can't come back up is because the way that we're looking at this potentially is an ending diagonal, meaning that we'll have one more little leg up, but may not quite get to the 78.50. Normally ending diagonal from the way we have is the fifth wave ends up getting fairly truncated, means we don't quite get as high as we did on the third wave inside that fifth, and then we start to roll over and go to the downside. So What we're looking at so far on the 4 hour, again, is a pretty complex correction as a WXYXZ. And we're also coming up on the trend line that we've had from this overall support from the move down. Pull a quick fib. You also kind of see we're also right at the 618 for a WXYXE potential move. So I think, before we were looking right here at the 0.5 as a WXY. And, again, we didn't kick off in a 5-wave move down. We kicked off in a 3-wave, which meant we're just going to go into a further prolonged correction as we just, ABC after ABC. So that's what I'm looking for, is just to complete this WXY. But again, confluence right here, we know where we are in a couple different areas. This was support on the move down and then broke it, and we just fell straight through. Again, it's acting as resistance right now where we are before, as well as this was resistance back here at the same time. So right where we're at right now, the 78 or 76.85, $7,700 mark. 78, really within that range, is where we do have some pretty heavy resistance, and it's really, in my opinion, do or die. Just because we got to make a decision here in the very, very near term future, in my opinion. If we look at the 4 hour from the GAN analysis, we did hit a trend line. We kind of broke through this one right here that held us up for a little bit, that we were using as support. We did have a resistance trend line, so we'll kind of see when we might end up just dropping down a little bit within here, get squeezed. But again, on we have April 30th coming up as a time fractal to really see what is that ultimately going to do. Where these intersections tend to be fairly weak points on the GAN analysis, and that's normally like where we see a lot of the transitions happen from whether it's a pump up or a dump down. We kind of see, just again back in time, where we hit this trend line, found resistance, got to the transition, pumped up. This one we fell through, but we did ride it, and then again transition where we pumped up, transition we pumped up. It was kind of just been the I guess the overall theme from the GAN analysis, where those do tend to be a little bit of a weaker point as we get closer to where they intersect. So that is what I'm going to be looking for in the upcoming future, and so I'd probably like to see us kind of consolidate sideways. Again, I am fairly bearish just with the overall resistance that is above us. Now we can absolutely blast through it. We've done it before, but it's based upon everything else that I'm looking at. I am looking for a pretty major correction to the downside. As we look at the 1 hour, this is where I'm talking about before, where we could potentially be looking at our ending diagonal, and we had this, third wave, ABC down, and then a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, normally when we have these ending diagonals, fifth waves normally don't go higher than the third. They tend to be truncated a little bit, maybe double top. So a little bit different wave structure than what we were looking at for ETH. For ETH, we're looking a little bit more of an ABC corrective, where we have, ETH actually, dropped down quite significantly more than what Bitcoin has. So it's kind of interesting to see that piece of it, as Bitcoin's been kind of getting consolidated right here. So we'll see if this is a little bit more of an ABC, or if this is going to be a ascending wedge for a ending 5-wave diagonal instead of the expanding 5-wave diagonal. So that's what I'm looking for here in the near term future. If we do break this level 7,800, again, we need to do it with conviction, just like how I was talked about before in the last video, where we were up here and we found resistance at 7,200. I wasn't extremely confident that we were going to be able to do it, but I said, going back from last video, that if we did, we would need to come back down and reset, and we need to blast through it with conviction, and that's exactly what we did. We had this massive green candle shoot straight up through it, and where that turns that resistance area into now a support at around 74. Because that whole area was resistance between that $7,250 to $7,400 mark. You can see we got rejected and we found a support for a little bit and then fell right back through rejection, and then they gave us another shot where we have now found that as support. So if we lose that support line around 7450-ish, 7400, that'd be a pretty clear indication that we have some further downside to go. So in my opinion, there's some indecision in the market, but again, this week I am looking for a fairly strong move to where it's either going to be upside or downside. I'm leaning more towards the downside based upon the technical analysis that I'm looking at, but like I said, it can go either way. We're kind of interested to see how this plays out, because that may give us a little bit of an inclination of where it's going to go in regards to if we do start to break a couple support levels, or how do we start to come up if we start to move up with a 5-wave motion after we have our finish 5-wave for the impulsive C. If we move up in a 5-wave move, again, if it starts with 5, then it ends with 5. So what we could potentially do to break up is, we have an ABC like this, come back down, test the local support, and then that's where we'd want to see us blast off with another 5-wave move, where we'd have a 5-wave move up, retest the resistance level, come back down for a 2, and then blast through it with a 3rd, and then a 4th, and then a 5th, so on and so forth, to move up. So ultimately, I think that's what we would need to do to get above it, but I'm not particularly leaning in that direction at the moment. So that is what I'm going to be looking for. We can dive into the Gantt chart on the 1 hour as well. Again, kind of give us a little bit more clarity potentially. Again, as I look for a lot of support and resistance and confluence and different areas of technical analysis, and regards to where are we going, what's the price action and other TA telling us. So in the Gantt chart, again, we've been talking about the April 30th, and this is the 1 hour move, so obviously it's going to be a little bit ways away. We've had this trend line right here. Looks like it's been some resistance, kind of popped above it, but again, with these trend lines, they're not extremely hard trend lines, meaning that we can bounce around them, and that's often what we do whenever we ride a trend line on the Gantt chart, is we just kind of bounce around through it. And until we get to really one of these intersections, that's normally where we tend to make a decision point for ultimately where we are going to go a little bit more for a trend. But from the time fractals, we do tend to see reaction to these time fractals here. This one was was our attempt to get back up higher, and that ultimately failed. We're coming up and actually at one of these time fractals right now. The yellow ones aren't always as strong. It's normally going to be these green ones and these red ones that I have that are going to be the strongest time fractals, but we still normally see some kind of reaction on those as well. So overall, guys, that's my thoughts, and that is ultimately what I will be looking for here in the near future when it comes to Bitcoin and ETH. Again, if you like my technical analysis, like my content, my charts, give me some feedback. Let me know your thoughts. Subscribe, smash the likes, ring that little bell. And I will see you guys